there comes a moment in life when you realize that strength is not loud, desperation is not love, and silence is not weakness. The world has taught many of us to chase validation, to beg for affection, to shrink ourselves just to be chosen. But today is about unlearning that. This message is for the ones who have been giving too much, waiting too long, and explaining themselves to people who never planned to understand them. Mental strength is not built by applause, it is built by boundaries. When you stop begging for love, attention, and respect, you don't lose people, you find yourself. This is a call to rise, to stand firm, and to remember that you were never created to plead for what should be freely given. Intro as there comes a moment in life when you realize that strength is not loud, desperation is not love, and silence is not weakness. The world has taught many of us to chase validation, to beg for affection, to shrink ourselves just to be chosen. But today is about unlearning that. This message is for the ones who have been giving too much, waiting too long, and explaining themselves to people who never planned to understand them. Mental strength is not built by applause, it is built by boundaries. When you stop begging for love, attention, and respect, you don't lose people, you find yourself. This is a call to rise, to stand firm, and to remember that you were never created to plead for what should be freely given. 7 keynotes it. 1. Mental strength begins the moment you stop asking others to confirm your worth. 2. Begging for love weakens self-respect and trains people to undervalue you. 3. Attention chases attention controlled by others. 4. Respect is maintained through boundaries, not explanations. 5. Emotional independence is power, not isolation. 6. Walking away is sometimes the loudest form of self-love. 7. Healing starts when you choose dignity over desperation. Hurrah's keynote no one expanded. Mental strength begins when you stop asking others to confirm your worth, because dependence on external validation quietly erodes your inner authority. Every time you look to someone else to tell you who you are, you hand them a piece of your power. Over time, this creates a cycle where approval becomes oxygen. And without it, you feel like you cannot breathe. Mentally strong people learn that affirmation is healthiest when it comes from within, not because they are arrogant, but because they are grounded. They understand that confidence built on applause collapses in silence, but confidence built on self-trust stands firm even when no one is clapping. When you constantly seek validation, you train your mind to believe that your value is negotiable. You start adjusting your behavior, lowering your standards, and softening your truth just to remain accepted. This is how strong people become exhausted and brilliant people become invisible. Mental strength requires the courage to disappoint others rather than betray yourself. It is choosing integrity over approval and peace over popularity. The moment you stop explaining why you deserve basic respect is the moment your posture changes, your voice steadies, and your spirit regains its weight. Many people confuse being chosen with being worthy, but worthiness is not something another person grants you. It is something you recognize. When you wait for others to choose you, you give them the power to define your timing, your value, and your future. Mentally strong individuals choose themselves first. They invest in their growth even when no one is watching. They keep their standards high even when it costs them relationships. They understand that loneliness is lighter than self-abandonment. There is a hidden strength in silence that only disciplined minds understand. When you no longer chase affirmation, you become selective with your energy. You stop proving and start protecting. You stop performing and start becoming. This is where mental strength matures, when you no longer feel the need to announce your worth because your presence speaks it. You don't argue to be respected. You remove access. You don't beg to be loved. You withdraw affection from places that drain you. This shift is uncomfortable at first because it forces you to sit with yourself. But it is in that discomfort that resilience is built. People who rely on validation often confuse attachment with love. They cling, they overgive, and they overexplain, hoping effort will earn appreciation. Mental strength teaches you that love does not require convincing. Respect does not need reminders. And attention that is genuine does not disappear when you stop chasing it. When you internalize this truth, your relationships change. You no longer tolerate inconsistency. You no longer make excuses for neglect. You no longer shrink to fit spaces that were never meant to hold you. The strongest minds understand that being misunderstood is sometimes the cost of being authentic. When you stop seeking approval, some people will resist the new version of you because they benefited from the old one. This does not mean you are becoming cold. It means you are becoming clear. Mental strength is clarity. It is knowing when to speak and when to walk away. It is trusting yourself enough to stand alone if necessary. It is recognizing that your peace is more valuable than being liked. When your worth is internal, rejection no longer destroys you. It instructs you. You stop taking everything personally and start seeing situations for what they are. You realize that some doors close not because you are lacking, but because you are outgrowing the room. This awareness creates emotional stability. You are no longer easily shaken, easily offended, or easily manipulated. Your confidence becomes quiet, your standards become firm, and your decisions become intentional. Mental strength is not about hardness, it is about wholeness. It is the ability to sit with yourself without distraction, without applause, without reassurance, and still know that you are enough. When you reach that place, you stop begging for love, attention, or respect because you finally understand that anything that requires begging was never meant to stay in your life. Begging for love weakens self-respect and trains people to undervalue you in ways that are subtle at first but devastating over time. When you plead to be chosen, you silently communicate that your presence is optional and your boundaries are flexible, even if the words you speak sound confident. The behavior tells a different story. The mind absorbs what it repeatedly practices, and when it practices desperation, it forgets dignity. This is how strong hearts slowly forget their own worth, not because they lack value, but because they place it in the hands of people who were never meant to carry it. Love was never designed to be negotiated. The moment you have to convince someone to see you, hear you, or prioritize you, the balance of power shifts. You begin to overextend yourself, giving more time, more emotion, more patience than is healthy. What starts as hope turns into habit, and soon you are pouring into spaces that never pour back. This does not make you loyal, it makes you depleted. Self-respect erodes quietly when you accept crumbs while calling them blessings. People learn how to treat you by what you tolerate. When you beg for love, you teach others that they can delay, ignore, and dismiss you without consequence. Not because they are cruel, but because you remove the cost of disrespect. The human mind responds to boundaries, not pleading. When boundaries disappear, so does value. This is why mentally strong people are not afraid to lose connections that require them to beg to belong. They understand that access to them is a privilege, not a right. Begging often comes disguised as patience. You tell yourself you are being understanding, supportive, or forgiving, but deep down you feel the imbalance. You feel the anxiety when messages go unanswered, the insecurity when effort is one-sided, the heaviness of constantly wondering where you stand. That emotional turbulence is not love, it is self-betrayal. Love should feel steady, not suspenseful. When you have to beg, your nervous system is constantly on alert, searching for reassurance that never fully arrives. There is nothing wrong with wanting love, but there is danger in chasing it at the cost of your identity. Begging slowly reshapes your personality. You become quieter where you should be honest, smaller where you should be bold, agreeable where you should be firm. Over time, you may not even recognize yourself. Mental strength requires the courage to say, if I have to beg for this, it is not aligned with who I am becoming. That realization is painful, but is also freeing. Self-respect is built through decisive action, not emotional pleading. It is built when you choose to step back instead of leaning in, when you choose silence instead of explanation, when you choose distance instead of desperation. This does not mean you stop loving. It means you stop abandoning yourself to prove that you are lovable. The strongest form of love is the one that does not require you to disappear to survive. When you stop begging, something powerful happens. The fog lifts. You see clearly who is capable of meeting you and who was only comfortable when you were overgiving. Some people will step up, others will fade out. Both outcomes are information. Mentally strong individuals accept this without resentment. They do not chase closure, they choose clarity. They understand that rejection is not always a loss. Sometimes it is protection. Undervaluation is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like inconsistency, delayed responses, empty promises, or affection that only appears when convenient. Begging teaches you to accept these patterns as normal. Mental strength teaches you to question them. You begin to ask yourself why you are fighting for something that should be mutual. That question alone can change the trajectory of your life. When self-respect becomes non-negotiable, your energy shifts. You no longer feel the urge to prove your worth. You no longer compete for attention. You no longer accept half-hearted effort. You start attracting connections that mirror the way you treat yourself, because confidence rooted in self-respect does not beg, it selects. The absence of begging is not arrogance, it is alignment. It is the quiet understanding that love, attention, and respect flow naturally toward those who are willing to walk away from anything that requires them to beg. Attention chased is attention controlled by others. And the moment you start running after it, you surrender your emotional freedom. When you seek attention from people who are inconsistent, distracted, or emotionally unavailable, you place your peace in their hands. Your mood begins to rise and fall based on their responses, their tone, their availability. This is not connection, it is dependency. Mental strength develops when you realize that attention gained through pursuit is rarely rooted in genuine interest, but inconvenience. Chasing attention teaches your mind to wait. You wait for replies, for acknowledgement, for validation that may or may not come. That waiting creates anxiety, and anxiety weakens clarity. Instead of focusing on your growth, your purpose, and your inner life, your energy becomes consumed by monitoring someone else's behavior. The more you chase, the more you shrink your world to revolve around them. Over time, this makes you predictable, emotionally accessible, on demand, and easy to deprioritize. People respond differently to those who chase versus those who choose themselves. When attention is chased, it becomes conditional. It is given when it benefits the other person, when they are bored, lonely, or in need of affirmation. This kind of attention is unstable and often manipulative, even if unintentionally so. You may find yourself working harder to maintain their interest, adjusting your tone, suppressing your needs, or exaggerating your availability. In doing so, you hand over control of the dynamic. Mental strength is recognizing that attention that must be chased is not aligned with respect. Real attention does not require pursuit. It is freely given. It shows up consistently, without reminders, without performance. When you stop chasing, you disrupt unhealthy patterns. You remove the incentive for others to take you for granted. This shift can feel uncomfortable at first because it confronts the fear of being ignored. But facing that fear is what builds emotional independence. Chasing attention often from a deep desire to be seen, heard, and valued. That desire is human, but when unmet internally, it becomes dangerous externally. You may tolerate mixed signals, emotional distance, or disrespect just to remain visible in someone's life. Mental strength teaches you that being visible to the wrong people can be more damaging than being invisible. Silence from others is easier to handle than silence from yourself. When you stop chasing attention, you regain authority over your time and emotions. You stop over-texting, over-explaining, and overextending. You allow space to reveal who truly values you. Some will lean and others will disappear. This is not loss, it is discernment. You begin to see clearly who was benefiting from your pursuit rather than your presence. Attention chased keeps you in reaction mode. You react to delays, to changes in tone, to shifts in energy. Your peace becomes reactive instead of rooted. Mental strength is proactive. It chooses stillness over scrambling, presence over proving. It understands that your value does not increase because someone finally notices you. You were already valuable before they looked your way. There is power in withholding access, not as a tactic, but as a boundary. When you no longer chase attention, you send a clear message to yourself first. I am not disposable. I am not an option. I am not here to entertain indifference. This internal message strengthens your posture in every relationship. You begin to move with intention rather than impulse. The strongest people do not demand attention, and they do not chase it. They cultivate a life that feels full, purposeful, and aligned. Attention then becomes a byproduct, not a goal. When someone chooses to show up, it is because they want to, not because they were pursued. That distinction changes everything. Control returns to you, your peace stabilizes, your self-respect deepens, and your presence becomes something others notice, not because you ask them to, but because it carries weight. Respect is maintained through boundaries, not explanations, because explanations invite debate while boundaries establish truth. When you over-explain your feelings, your needs, or your decisions, you unknowingly give others the impression that your limits are negotiable. Mentally strong people understand that clarity does not require justification. A boundary stated once calmly and firmly carries more authority than 1,000 emotional explanations. Many people believe that if they can just explain themselves better, they will finally be understood and respected. But respect is not built on understanding alone. It is built on consistency. The moment you keep explaining the same boundary after it has been crossed, you teach others that consequences are optional. This creates a dynamic where your words are heard but not honored. Boundaries without enforcement become suggestions, and suggestions rarely command respect. Explanations often come from a place of fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of being disliked, fear of losing connection. But mental strength is choosing self-respect over approval. When you hold firm without over-explaining, you communicate confidence. You show that you trust your own judgment enough not to seek permission for it. This quiet certainty shifts how people interact with you. Boundaries protect your energy, your time, and your emotional health. They are not walls meant to isolate you, but filters that determine who has access to you. When you rely on explanations instead of boundaries, you leave yourself exposed. You become emotionally available to people who have not earned that access. Mentally strong individuals are selective. They understand that not everyone deserves front row seats in their life. Over-explaining also invites manipulation. When you lay out every emotional detail, people who lack respect may use that information to push guilt or pressure you into compromising. Boundaries remove that leverage. A simple no, a clear limit, or a decisive action leaves no room for negotiation. Silence after a boundary is often more powerful than continued discussion. Respect grows when people know what to expect from you. Consistent boundaries create predictability. Others learn quickly what behavior is acceptable and what is not. This does not make you rigid, it makes you reliable. Mentally strong people do not shift their standards based on who they are dealing with. Their boundaries remain intact whether they are alone or surrounded by others. Many confuse boundaries with aggression, but true boundaries are calm. They are not reactive or emotional. They do not require raised voices or dramatic exits. They are simply upheld. Walking away from disrespect without explanation is not cold. It is self-honoring. The absence of reaction is often the clearest message. When you stop explaining yourself, you also stop exhausting yourself. You conserve emotional energy. You free your mind from rehearsing conversations and justifying decisions. Mental strength thrives in simplicity. You know what you will tolerate, and you act accordingly. People who respect themselves do not need to demand respect from others. It naturally follows their behavior. Boundaries create a structure that others either adapt to or remove themselves from. Both outcomes serve you. You no longer chase understanding. You stand in alignment. Respect maintained through boundaries feels different. It is quiet, stable, and non-negotiable. It does not fluctuate based on moods or opinions. It is rooted in self-awareness and reinforced through action. When boundaries replace explanations, your presence changes. Your words become fewer, but your impact becomes stronger. Emotional independence is power, not isolation, because it allows you to connect without losing yourself. Many people fear becoming emotionally independent because they confuse it with being distant, cold, or detached. In reality, emotional independence means you are no longer dependent on others to regulate your emotions, define your worth, or validate your choices. You can love deeply without clinging, care without controlling, and commit without collapsing your identity. When you are emotionally dependent, Relationships become survival-based. You need constant reassurance, frequent attention, and emotional proximity just to feel secure. This creates pressure on others and anxiety within yourself. Mental strength develops when you learn to self-soothe, self-reflect, and self-correct. You stop outsourcing your emotional stability and start building it internally. This is not loneliness, it is maturity. Emotionally independent people still value connection, but they do not fear absence. They understand that distance does not equal abandonment and silence does not equal rejection. This inner security allows them to respond rather than react. Instead of panicking when someone pulls away, they observe. Instead of chasing reassurance, they check in with themselves. This grounded response protects their peace and preserves their dignity. Isolation cuts you off from people. Emotional independence frees you from emotional entanglement. You no longer feel responsible for fixing others, saving others, or carrying emotions that do not belong to you. This creates healthier relationships because you show up whole, not hollow. You contribute, not compensate. You give from abundance, not from fear. Many people overgive because they believe love must be proven through sacrifice. Emotional independence teaches you that love does not require self-erasure. You do not have to exhaust yourself to be chosen. You do not have to stay in emotional chaos to prove loyalty. Mental strength is knowing when to engage and when to detach without guilt. When you are emotionally independent, rejection loses its sting. It may still hurt, but it does not define you. You understand that not every connection is meant to last, and not every loss is a failure. This perspective allows you to release people without resentment and move forward without bitterness. Emotional independence creates resilience. You become less reactive and more intentional. Your decisions are no longer driven by fear of being alone, but by alignment with your values. You choose relationships that complement your life rather than consume it. You set standards without apology and walk away without drama. This calm authority changes how people interact with you. Emotionally independent people are not emotionally unavailable. They are emotionally regulated. They communicate clearly, love intentionally, and leave when necessary. Their presence feels safe because it is not demanding. Their love feels secure because it is not desperate. Power lies in being able to stand alone without feeling empty. Emotional independence gives you that power. It teaches you that companionship is a choice, not a requirement for wholeness. When you stop fearing solitude, you stop settling for less than you deserve. You stop confusing attachment with love and start choosing connection from a place of strength rather than need. True emotional independence is not about pushing people away. It is about no longer pulling yourself apart to keep them close. Walking away is sometimes the loudest form of self-love because it communicates what words never could. Many people stay in situations long past their expiration date because they believe endurance equals strength. But mental strength is not proven by how much pain you can tolerate. It is revealed by how quickly you recognize when something is harming you. Choosing to walk away is not weakness, it is clarity. Staying where you are repeatedly disrespected teaches your mind to normalize mistreatment. You begin to rationalize behavior that once felt unacceptable. You minimize your feelings, excuse neglect, and convince yourself that patience will eventually be rewarded. But patience without boundaries becomes self-abandonment. Walking away interrupts this cycle. It draws a line where your dignity begins. Words often fail in environments where respect is absent. You can explain your pain, voice your needs, and express your expectations, yet nothing changes. At that point, continued dialogue becomes noise. Walking away removes the audience. It shifts the dynamic completely. Silence backed by action carries more authority than repeated conversations that lead nowhere. Self-love is not always gentle. Sometimes it is decisive. Walking away requires courage because it forces you to confront uncertainty. It means releasing familiarity, even when it is painful. But familiarity should never be mistaken for safety. Mental strength is trusting yourself enough to choose the unknown over a situation that is slowly breaking you down. When you walk away, you reclaim your energy. You stop pouring into spaces that drain you. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head, hoping for different outcomes. Your mind begins to quiet. This peace is not accidental, it is earned. It is the result of honoring yourself, even when it costs you connection. Walking away also exposes truth. Those who valued you will reflect, adjust, and respect your decision. Those who benefited from your tolerance will react with guilt, blame, or indifference. Both responses are revealing. You gain clarity not by confrontation, but by absence. Many people fear walking away because they worry about being misunderstood. But mental strength accepts that not everyone will understand your boundaries. Some people only notice your value once you remove access. Walking away is not about punishment, it is about protection. There is a difference between giving up and letting go. Giving up comes from hopelessness. Letting go comes from self-awareness. Walking away is letting go with intention. It is choosing healing over history. It is choosing peace over proof. When you honor yourself by walking away, you send a message to your future self. You reinforce the belief that you are worth protecting. This builds confidence that cannot be shaken by rejection or loss. You learn that you can survive endings and still remain whole. Walking away is not the end of love. Sometimes it is the beginning of loving yourself properly. It reshapes your standards. It refines your discernment. It teaches you that staying should always be a choice, never an obligation. The loudness of walking away is not in the noise it makes, but in the respect it restores. It is the quiet declaration that your well-being matters, even when no one else chooses to treat it that way. Healing starts when you choose dignity over desperation, because desperation keeps wounds open while dignity allows them to close. When you act from desperation, every decision is fueled by fear of loss, fear of abandonment, fear of being alone. That fear pushes you to accept less than you deserve, to stay where you are unseen, and to tolerate behavior that slowly erodes your sense of self. Healing cannot happen in environments where you are constantly compromising your worth. Desperation makes you chase explanations, closure, and validation from people who contributed to your pain. You replay conversations, search for meaning in mixed signals, and hope for apologies that may never come. This keeps you emotionally tied to the very source of your hurt. Dignity breaks that tie. It shifts your focus from what they failed to give to what you must now give yourself. Choosing dignity means accepting hard truths without self-blame. It means recognizing that someone's inability to love you properly is not proof of your inadequacy. Healing begins when you stop internalizing rejection and start seeing it as redirection. This mental shift frees you from the constant need to prove your value. Desperation asks, what can I do to make them stay? Dignity asks, why am I trying to stay where I am not valued? That question alone changes your posture. You stop shrinking, you stop pleading, you stop explaining your pain to people who already showed you who they are. Healing requires this kind of honesty with yourself. When you choose dignity, you allow yourself to grieve without begging. You feel the loss fully, but you do not chase what has already shown you its limits. This is emotional maturity. It is understanding that healing is not about erasing pain, but about refusing to live inside it. Dignity gives pain a place to pass through instead of a place to settle. Many people delay healing because they confuse holding on with hope. But hope that costs you your self-respect is not hope. It is fear disguised as loyalty. Dignity teaches you to release without resentment. You do not need closure from someone else when you are willing to close the door yourself. Healing also requires patience with yourself. Choosing dignity does not mean you instantly feel strong. There will be moments of weakness, memories that resurface, and urges to return to what is familiar. Dignity is choosing not to act on those urges. It is staying aligned with who you are becoming, even when your emotions lag behind your growth. When dignity leads, your standards rise naturally. You no longer negotiate your needs. You no longer justify mistreatment. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. Healing shows up in your ability to walk away without bitterness and remember without longing. Choosing dignity over desperation restores your sense of control. You stop waiting for someone else to change so you can feel better. You take responsibility for your own peace. This empowerment is the foundation of true healing. Healing is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet decisions made daily to honor yourself. It is choosing rest over rumination, clarity over chaos, and self-respect over temporary comfort. When dignity becomes your default, healing is no longer something you chase. It becomes something you live